And when we talk about resilience, most people rush to the strategies. They want the hacks, the tools, the steps. They want to know how to push through, how to stay strong, how to keep going when everything says stop. But I found that before we ask how, we have to start by asking why. Because if we don't know why we're doing something, then the how becomes unbearable. But if we have a deep reason, one that's rooted in who we are and what we care about, the how becomes a challenge worth facing. It's the difference between struggle and sacrifice. Struggle without purpose feels like suffering. Sacrifice with purpose feels like meaning. Think about it. Every resilient person you admire, from the athlete who came back from injury to the entrepreneur who rebuilt after failure to the parent who worked 3 jobs to keep the lights on, they didn't just power through because they're tough. They did it because something inside them was louder than the noise outside. Something mattered more. That's why the first step to building a resilient mindset is not grit or positivity or even confidence. It's clarity. Clarity of purpose. Clarity of why. Without that, resilience turns into burnout. We push and push, but we don't know what we're pushing toward. We chase strength, but lose ourselves in the process. That's not resilience. That's erosion. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I met a young man, brilliant, talented, had everything on paper. He told me he was burned out. I'm grinding every day, he said, but it feels like I'm going nowhere. So I asked him one question. Why are you doing it? He gave me a list. Money, expectations, pressure, fear of falling behind. Not one of those reasons came from inside him. They were all borrowed from society, from his parents, from the version of success he thought he had to live up to. That's the trap. When our why comes from outside of us, our resilience has an expiration date. But when it's born from within, when it's connected to something we truly care about, it becomes self-reinforcing. We don't burn out as easily because we're not just running, we're running towards something that matters. And that doesn't mean your purpose has to be some grand world-changing mission. Sometimes your why is simple. I want to be the first in my family to graduate. I want to give my kids a better life. I want to prove to myself that I can. Those are powerful enough because they're yours. They're rooted in your values, your beliefs, your story. Purpose isn't about impressing people. It's about anchoring yourself. And in the hardest moments, when everything is shaking, it's your anchor that keeps you grounded. That's why some people fall apart under pressure and others rise. It's not because they're stronger, it's because they're clearer. They know what they're holding on for. Now, don't get me wrong, purpose won't eliminate the pain, but it will make the pain count. And that's everything. That's the difference between quitting and continuing. When you know your why, your setbacks become part of the process, not the end of it. Every failure becomes a teacher. Every obstacle becomes fuel. That's how a resilient mind works. It doesn't just endure, it transforms struggle into meaning. So the real question isn't how do I become more resilient? The real question is what do I care enough about that I'm willing to endure? And I'll be honest, finding your why is not always easy. It's not always obvious. It's not something you Google. It's something you reflect on. It's something you feel. You have to look back on your life, find the moments that moved you, the struggles that shaped you, the values that never left you. That's where your why is hiding. And when you find it, everything changes. Because resilience stops being a performance and starts being a byproduct of purpose. You don't have to force it. It becomes who you are. Here's the final thought I want to leave you with. You are going to face resistance. That's not a possibility. It's a guarantee. Life will test you. It will stretch you. It will ask, do you really want this? And in that moment, your answer can't be a motivational quote. It has to be your why, something real, something that belongs to you. Because when your purpose is bigger than your pain, you'll keep going. When your why is stronger than your fear, you'll stand back up. And when your reason is rooted in love, not ego, not pressure, not perfection, then you will not only survive adversity, you'll grow because of it. That's the first essential step to a resilient mindset. Start with why. Always start with why. Because the strength you need doesn't begin in your body. It begins in your belief. We've been taught to avoid failure, to dodge it, hide from it, protect ourselves from its sting. Somewhere along the way, failure became the thing we feared the most. Something shameful, something we should pretend never happened. But what if I told you that failure isn't the opposite of resilience? It's the birthplace of it. Let that sink in. We don't grow resilience in the absence of hardship. We grow it because of hardship. Strength isn't built in comfort, it's built in discomfort. It's built when things don't go as planned. When the path you thought was guaranteed disappears. When you're forced to rebuild with nothing but your will to keep going. That's when resilience shows up. Failure isn't the enemy, it's the invitation. But we live in a world that doesn't celebrate the fall. We celebrate the bounce back, the comeback story, the turnaround, the shiny version where everything is put back together better than before. And yet we rarely talk about the moment people hit the ground. The silence, the doubt, the shame, that messy middle where it's not inspiring yet, just painful. And still, that's where the magic begins. You don't learn who you are when things are easy. You learn who you are when the floor drops out from under you. You find out what you're made of when nothing goes according to plan. When the world says, you can't, and something inside you whispers, watch me. There was a time when I failed hard. A moment where everything I'd worked for unraveled in front of me. And I'll be honest, I didn't handle it gracefully. I didn't smile through it. I didn't post a motivational quote. I broke down. I questioned everything. I felt small. But eventually, when the dust settled, I realized something. I was still here. I'd survived the fall. And slowly, I started to rebuild, not from who I used to be, but from who I'd become. That version of me, the one forged in failure, was stronger than the one who had never faced it. Because once you failed and lived through it, you stop fearing it so much. You realize that falling doesn't define you. Staying down does. And the truth is, the most resilient people aren't the ones who avoid failure. They're the ones who develop a relationship with it. Who learn from it, who use it. The question isn't, will I fall? The question is, what will I learn when I do? Look at children. They fall constantly. It's how they learn to walk. Nobody scolds a toddler for stumbling. We cheer them on because we understand it's part of the process. But somewhere along the way, we unlearn that. We start believing that falling is a flaw, that mistakes make us weak, that if we mess up, we lose our worth. That couldn't be further from the truth. Your mistakes don't diminish your value, they prove your courage. They show that you tried, that you risked something, that you weren't content to play it safe. And that's where resilience is born. Not in perfection, but in persistence. I once spoke with a woman who'd lost her business after years of building it from scratch. She told me it broke her heart, shattered her identity, but then she said something I'll never forget. After everything fell apart, I finally learned how to stand up without hiding behind success. And now I trust myself in a way I never did before. That's what failure does when we let it teach us. It strips away the illusion. It shows us what we're really made of. And often it introduces us to a version of ourselves we never would have met otherwise. Here's what we need to understand. Resilience isn't the ability to avoid the fall. It's the ability to rise with more wisdom than you had before. Failure is feedback, it's data, it's information. It says, this didn't work, try something else. It doesn't say you're worthless. That's the story we attach to it, and we have the power to change that story. When we stop fearing failure, we start taking more risks. We become bolder. We speak up. We step into arenas where the outcome isn't guaranteed. That's where leadership lives. That's where growth happens. That's where life gets interesting. You see, a resilient mindset is built not by avoiding the storm, but by learning how to navigate through it, by learning to breathe in the chaos, by remembering that each failure you face is just another brick in the foundation of your strength. And maybe the most powerful part, when you own your failures, when you don't hide them, don't mask them, don't edit them for public consumption, you give other people permission to do the same. You become a lighthouse. A signal that it's okay to fall. It's okay to be messy. It's okay to start over. That's leadership, not the polished version, but the real one. So the next time you fall, don't rush to get up just to prove you're okay. Pause, learn, ask yourself, what did this reveal about me? What can I take from this? Because that is how you turn pain into progress. That is how you turn failure into fuel. And if we can embrace failure as the foundation, not a detour, but the actual path, then we begin to understand that resilience isn't some superpower we're born with. It's something we build, one fall at a time. Not despite our failures, but because of them. We all love motivation. It feels good. It's exciting. It's inspiring. It wakes us up in the morning with energy and enthusiasm, ready to take on the world. But let's be honest, motivation is a terrible friend. It shows up late. It disappears without warning. It can't be counted on when you really need it. And if you build your resilience around motivation, you're building on sand. You don't rise through life because you're motivated every day. You rise because you've built the discipline to keep showing up, especially on the days you're not. That's the hard truth we don't like to hear. Because discipline doesn't get the same spotlight as motivation. Motivation gets the posters, the music, the highlight reels. Discipline lives in the quiet moments. The early mornings where no one's watching. The hard choices that no one celebrates. The small habits that feel like they're not making a difference. Until one day they do. Discipline is boring. It's repetitive. It's unglamorous. But it's also what separates those who keep going from those who burn out. And the most resilient people I know aren't the ones who feel fired up every morning. They're the ones who've made a decision. I'm going to do the work whether I feel like it or not. Because they know this. Emotion is temporary, but identity is permanent. And when you train your mind to act based on identity instead of impulse, everything changes. You stop asking yourself, do I feel like it today? And you start saying, this is who I am. And I get it. That sounds intense, but it's not about perfection. It's about practice. It's about creating daily rituals that align with the kind of person you want to become. Small actions that, over time, rewire your brain and reshape your mindset. Take someone who wants to become a writer. Motivation might get them to write when they're inspired, but discipline will get them to write every day, even when the words won't flow, even when every sentence feels forced. And you know what happens when they do that? They become a writer. Not because they were born with talent, but because they showed up more times than they didn't. That's resilience. Not in the loud, heroic way we often think of, but in the steady, quiet kind of way that's built brick by brick. You show up, you do the work, you do it again, and eventually you build something unshakable. The real enemy of resilience isn't failure, it's inconsistency. Starting and stopping, pushing hard and burning out, living in cycles of bursts and breakdowns. But discipline cuts through that. It gives you something to hold on to when everything else feels uncertain. It gives you rhythm. And rhythm builds momentum. And momentum builds belief. That's another thing we don't talk about enough. How much discipline creates confidence. Not just because you're achieving more, but because you're keeping promises to yourself. That's where self-trust is born. In the little agreements you honor every day. You say you'll go for a walk, and you do. You say you'll make that call, and you do. You say you'll finish the work, and you do. Doesn't matter if it's small. What matters is that you follow through. Eventually, your brain starts to believe you. It starts to say, when I say I'll do something, I mean it. And that belief, that's power. That's what makes you resilient. Because when life hits you, and it will, you'll still be able to rely on the one thing you've trained, yourself. You won't need a surge of motivation to get out of bed. You won't wait for the stars to align before you take action. You'll simply do what needs to be done, because that's what discipline trains you to do. Act with purpose, not emotion. Now let me be clear. This isn't about pushing yourself into exhaustion. Resilience doesn't mean running yourself into the ground. It means being grounded. It means building a system that supports your long-term growth, not your short-term ego. That system is made of habits, daily practices, meaningful routines, the kind that don't depend on how you feel, but on who you want to become. I spoke once with a man who had been through incredible loss. He told me the only thing that kept him afloat was the routine he had built long before the storm came. Morning walks, journaling, intentional time with his kids. He said, I didn't have the strength to be strong, but I had a rhythm that carried me until I could stand again. That's the gift of discipline. It carries you when you're too tired to carry yourself. So the question isn't, how do I stay motivated? The better question is, what kind of system can I build so I don't need to be motivated all the time? Because life will not wait for you to feel ready. It won't pause until you're inspired. It will keep coming. And the most resilient people aren't those who feel like showing up every day. They're the ones who've decided they will no matter what. There's something beautiful in that. Something powerful about choosing consistency in a world that's obsessed with intensity. Something deeply human about saying, I'm not here to be perfect. I'm here to keep going. Discipline won't make your life easier, but it will make you stronger. And when you become the kind of person who shows up, even on the hard days, even when no one's cheering, even when it would be easier to quit, you become someone who can handle anything. Because you're not driven by mood, you're driven by mission. And that's the kind of resilience that doesn't break. It bends, it flexes, it adapts. But it never disappears. Because it was never about the feeling, it was always about the choice. Show up, do the work, repeat. That's how you build a mind that can weather any storm. We've all been told stories about who we are. Some of them were spoken out loud. Some were quiet, implied, absorbed through years of experiences. Stories like, you're too sensitive. You're not a leader. You're not smart enough. You always mess things up. Whether we realize it or not, many of us live inside those stories for years, sometimes decades, without ever questioning who wrote them. But here's the truth. Your life is a story, and you are the author. That doesn't mean you control every chapter. Life will still throw curveballs. Pain will still knock at your door. You'll lose people, miss opportunities, make decisions you wish you could take back. But authors don't control every plot twist. They control the narrative. They decide what the moment means. And that changes everything. Because resilient people don't live easier lives. They don't dodge failure or skip heartbreak or magically avoid adversity. They just tell a different story about it. Where some see a dead end, they write a turning point. Where some say, this broke me, they say, this shaped me. Same event, different meaning. And meaning is everything. We've all had moments that knock the wind out of us. A loss, a betrayal, a dream slipping through our fingers. And in those moments, it's easy to adopt the role of the victim. To let the story become one of defeat. This always happens to me. I guess I'm not cut out for it. Maybe I was never meant to win. It's human. It's understandable. But it's not the whole truth. The real truth is we may not choose what happens to us, but we do choose how we frame it. We choose what we take from it. We choose what we do next. And that choice, the choice to rewrite the story, is where resilience lives. I met a man once who'd spent years in prison. When he got out, he could have lived the rest of his life under the weight of that story. He could have said, I'm a failure, I'm broken, my life is over. But instead, he said, that chapter taught me who I don't want to be. Now I get to write a different ending. Today he mentors young people headed down the same road he once walked. His story didn't end in shame. It began a new purpose. That's what reframing does. It doesn't erase the past, it reclaims it. It doesn't pretend the pain wasn't real. It declares that the pain won't define you. And that is what makes the mind resilient. Not pretending everything is fine, not avoiding struggle, but transforming struggle into strength by giving it meaning. You don't have to pretend your hardship was beautiful, but you can decide it will build something beautiful. And this is important. Reframing doesn't mean lying to yourself. It's not about sugarcoating your experience or pretending something awful wasn't awful. It's about looking honestly at what happened and asking a different question. Now what? Because why did this happen to me rarely leads to growth. But what can I do with this opens a new door. There's a moment in every person's life when the story changes. Sometimes it's sudden, a diagnosis, a goodbye, a phone call you didn't expect. And sometimes it's slow, the kind of change that sneaks up on you until one day you look in the mirror and realize you're not who you used to be. In both cases, the question is the same. Who will I become because of this? The most powerful people I've ever met weren't the ones who had it easy. They were the ones who wrote powerful stories with painful material. They were the ones who said, this could break me, or it could break me open. Think about the stories you're telling yourself right now about your ability, your worth, your future. Are they stories that make you small, or stories that make you strong? Are they built from fear or from truth? Because you can't live beyond the story you believe about yourself. Sometimes resilience looks like rewriting that story one line at a time. You wake up and instead of saying, I'm overwhelmed, you say, I'm learning to manage more than I used to. You face a challenge and say, this is hard, but it's not impossible. You look in the mirror and say, maybe I'm not where I want to be, but I'm still writing. And over time, those tiny edits become a new narrative, a new identity. Not because the world changed, but because you did. It's easy to let other people write your story, to let circumstances shape the arc. But resilience is born when you pick up the pen. When you stop asking what will happen to me and start declaring, here's what I'm going to do with what's happened. That shift in authorship, that shift from reaction to intention is the heartbeat of a resilient mind. You're not trapped in your past. You're not defined by your worst day. You're not limited to one storyline. You get to rewrite. You get to grow. You get to decide that this chapter, no matter how painful, will not be the end. It will be the reason you rose. And maybe that's what real resilience is. Not just getting back up, but rising with a story that gives the fall meaning. Because we all fall, we all break, we all face moments when the life we imagine vanishes in front of us. But when we take ownership of the story, when we choose to tell it differently, we turn those moments into power, into wisdom, into legacy. So ask yourself, what's the story I've been telling? What if I rewrote it? What if this isn't the chapter where I lose, but the one where I come back stronger than ever? You're not just living your life, you're authoring it. Every thought, every word, every belief, that's the ink. Make it count. We tend to think of resilience as a solo act, like the strong, silent type who pushes through pain alone, the self-made person who never asks for help, the one who carries the weight of the world without flinching. It's romanticized, it looks noble, and in some ways, we admire it. Because real resilience doesn't happen in isolation. It's not built on independence alone. It's built through connection, through support, through the kind of relationships that remind you, even when everything else feels like it's falling apart, that you're not alone. We survive together. You can have the strongest mindset in the world. You can be disciplined. You can learn from failure. You can rewrite your narrative, but at some point, at some crucial moment, you will still need someone to remind you who you are when you forget. And that's not weakness, that's being human. There's something sacred about being seen, about having someone in your corner who doesn't need you to be okay, but also doesn't let you stay stuck. Of the kind of person who doesn't just say, let me fix it, but says, I'll sit with you until you can move again. That's the kind of connection that breeds resilience. We are wired for belonging. For most of human history, our survival depended on the tribe. We weren't meant to face lions alone. And though the threats have changed, the need hasn't. The lions look different now. Grief, burnout, self-doubt, rejection, but they're just as real. And we still need each other to make it through. I once spoke with a man who had been through unimaginable loss. He said the turning point wasn't when he found answers or even hope. It was when someone simply showed up. Not with advice, not with a solution, just presence. That presence was enough to remind him that he didn't have to carry it alone. Sometimes resilience isn't loud. It's not about pushing harder or doing more. Sometimes it's found in quiet companionship, in being able to say, I'm struggling, and hearing someone respond, I know, I've been there too. Let's keep going. That's the power of shared experience. It turns shame into solidarity. It turns silence into healing. And slowly, it builds strength. Not the kind that shuts people out, but the kind that lets people in. But that requires vulnerability. And that's where we hesitate. We've been taught that asking for help is weakness, that opening up is risky, that emotions are messy and better left out of sight. And so we isolate, we armor up, we say, I'm fine, even when we're not. But the truth is, you can't build resilience while pretending everything is okay. Resilient people aren't those who never fall apart. They're the ones who know how to reach out when they do. Who've learned that vulnerability is not the opposite of strength. It's the birthplace of it. Because when you're honest, when you let yourself be seen, you open the door to connection. And that connection is what sustains you. You don't need hundreds of people, just a few who see the real you, who remind you of your worth when you've forgotten it, who believe in your potential even when all you can see is pain. There's a moment that happens in every relationship, whether with a friend, a mentor, a partner, where you say the thing you were afraid to say, and instead of being rejected, you're received. Not judged, but accepted. That moment is where healing begins. That's where trust grows. That's where your foundation gets stronger. And here's the beauty of it. When you've experienced that kind of support, you become that kind of support. You become someone who listens differently, who sees people not for who they are on the surface, but for who they are underneath. You become a safe place for others. And that creates a ripple. Resilient communities are built one moment like that at a time. And it doesn't take grand gestures. Sometimes all it takes is asking a better question. Not just, how are you, but how are you really? And then waiting long enough to hear the truth. Sometimes it's sending a message just to say, I'm thinking of you. Sometimes it's just showing up. Over and over, we underestimate the power of presence, but often that's all someone needs to keep going. Not a fix, not a pep talk, just someone who won't leave. I remember a woman who once told me that during the hardest year of her life, her best friend texted her every morning, I'm here if you need me. Most days, she didn't respond. But knowing that someone was there, that someone cared enough to keep reaching out, that gave her the strength to make it through. That's resilience in motion. And it works both ways, because when we support others, we strengthen ourselves. We get out of our own heads. We see beyond our own pain. We're reminded that we have something to offer, that we're needed. And feeling needed is one of the most powerful antidotes to despair. You talk a lot about grit, about inner strength, about pushing through. But we forget the glue that holds us together. The people who walk with us. The ones who catch us when we fall. the ones who speak life into us when all we can hear is doubt. You don't have to do this alone. Yes, build your mindset. Yes, find your discipline. Yes, grow from failure. But don't forget to build your circle. Because when life gets heavy, and it will, it's your people that will make the weight feel just a little bit lighter. And maybe that's the greatest kind of resilience, the kind that says, I don't have to carry everything by myself. We carry it together.